All right, thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'm going to go ahead and just get us started. My name is Dan Reed. I am the marketing and admin manager for Score Maine, and today's workshop is Startup Marketing on a Budget. And just to give you a little insight into what my background is and how I can be helpful for this particular topic, I do all of the marketing here for Score in Maine, and I also put on our workshop programs, just like this workshop. And I also am a social media strategic marketing advisor for Score in Fairfield County. And I hold a marketing seat and chair seat on a few local boards. So I do have a lot of experience with how to market locally, especially here in Maine. And I'm looking forward to bringing that experience to our webinar today and showing everyone how they can market a little bit easier. And just to dive right in, today's workshop, we're going to be covering the kind of basic understanding of like what marketing is, how to market, how to think about marketing from the perspective of a marketing seat or someone who does marketing rather than thinking about it through the terms of how do I just reach my customers. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to focus on who are our ideal customers. So when you're doing marketing, who is the perfect person for you to reach, and how do you try to reach that kind of person more often? And we're going to be doing that through a few examples, as well as some do's and don'ts of how to really get started with your marketing and startup marketing. And we'll talk a little bit about the different advertising options that are available and how you can use them and leverage them better for yourself, especially if you understand who your ideal customer is. So let's just to get started on the ground floor. What exactly is marketing? Why is it important? Why do we need to think about marketing in certain kinds of ways? That kind of thing. Marketing is about reaching audiences. It's about how to convey what your business or brand is, or what your service or product is, to the folks who are likely to use it and will get value out of it. And businesses in particular have a few kinds of audiences that they market to. I know everyone it's very easy to think, oh, well, I have 1,000 people who follow me on Instagram, but not all 1,000 of those folks engage with all of your posts. The majority of them don't. More people will see your post and then will engage with them. And there's a difference between the folks who just scroll by, the folks who will look at your posts, and the folks who will comment every time. And really, to break it down into 3 different categories, you kind of have those evangelists, or those folks who engage with they're really brand driven. They might really like a brand or a product or a service or a company, and they engage with the social media of that company or with the marketing of that company every time they see it. Maybe they open the newsletter every time it comes in and they read all of the articles, or they like all of the posts on Instagram or Facebook, or maybe they like to drop comments and kind of discuss what's going on with your brand or company. Those are what we would call our evangelists, or our core audience. They're likely folks who purchase from your business or who are regular clients or customers. And the next stage is kind of like folks who are in your orbit. So these are people who might like your social media page. They might be on your newsletter, but they're not necessarily high engaging, or they might engage every once in a while. Maybe they've tried your product or your service once or twice. They might not be necessarily to that level of an evangelist where they engage every time, but they're at least familiar with you. And then we also have our out of orbit folks. And how I like to define out of orbit is these are folks who could potentially be in your orbit or could potentially be evangelists for your business, but they just haven't really heard of you yet. There is kind of like a 4th category of like people who would just never be interested, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense to focus on for a workshop like this. So the real key takeaway from these different kinds of audiences is that every audience is going to respond differently to the marketing that you put out there. And you're going to want to make sure that when you're doing marketing, you're trying to speak to at least one of these audiences and trying to get them to do something. We call that a call to action in marketing, or just making an action or making a buying decision. But we want to try to, every time we put out a marketing piece, we're trying to either remind someone that we're there to get in touch, or maybe we have a new product that we launched and we want them to try it out, something along those lines. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about how you can take that message that you're trying to get out there and how it's going to be received by those different audiences that you have. And on the flip side of this, or actually on the other side of this, you really need to know your business. You need to really understand how your product, your service, or your experience, or whatever it is that you're trying to sell really connects with your audience, or whoever's going to buy it. You need to really understand what you might have heard your SCORE mentor call a value proposition. So what is your value proposition to your potential client or your audience, and how or why do they value it? What's coming to the table for them to like really decide this is something I want to spend my money on? And for a business, it really kind of breaks down into 3 or so different things. You either have a product, you have a service, or there's an experience. And you really kind of want to figure out what other businesses your customers purchase from that have either a product service experience that's similar to yours, and how does that relate? How can you learn what they're doing and how it really kind of relates back to your business, and how you can take things that other people are doing and relate it back to your business. And how do customers see your business? So when a customer sees your business, or when they see a post on Facebook or Instagram or something like that, how do they really perceive that? When they see your business, do they just go, oh, well, scroll right past? Or is it something where, someone sees your business and they're like, oh, well, I find that really interesting? What kind of person sees it is it interesting, and what kind of person just kind of scrolls past? You want to really understand who those people are on kind of like a personal level, not individually, but more kind of generally. And the best way to do that is to know your customer. So who are your existing customers? Who are your existing best customers? Where do your existing best customers spend their time? A good example is, when are they in the right mindset? If you're selling something like iced coffee, if someone is already at work, or maybe they work from home, selling iced coffee or trying to appeal to folks who are buying iced coffee, or who are working from home, might not be the right choice. You might want to look into those folks who are on commute and they have time to kind of go through a drive-through, or maybe they have like 10 minutes to stop for an iced coffee. You want to make sure that they're in the right mindset at the right point in time. When someone's working from home, they might have a coffee pot, they already made their own coffee, versus that opportunity when they're traveling and they might need a pick-me-up. And how much contact is too much? So if you're sending out multiple emails a day to your clients, a lot of people might say that's too many emails and I'm going to unsubscribe from your list. Or if you're posting too much on Facebook and they see you all the time, they might go, I scroll past this a lot, I'm not really interested, I'm going to unfollow your page. So you want to make sure that you're putting out enough content to really keep on people's radar, but not too much content or not too much advertising to where people might have a principled stance to not patron your business just because they've seen it too much. And we are going to do an example today to kind of get an understanding of how this works and like what it can look like. And our example today is going to be a Biddeford yoga studio. So we'll say that we're going to open a new yoga studio in Biddeford. We want to provide yoga classes and an exercise space. And we kind of want to center it around a community space for people who are interested in healthy living. So it's a little bit of that service side of things, where you're doing yoga classes and you're providing this space where people can come and practice yoga, while also that experience side of things, where you're kind of creating a community space for people who want to do yoga and might want to meet other people who are interested in the same things that they are. So we'll start with our two core components. Know your business. So what kind of business is the yoga studio going to look like? Or what kind of business would your business look like? In our instance, we're looking at something that's kind of somewhere between a service and an experience. So are we going to be offering this yoga studio to businesses, or is this something where we're offering it kind of to the general public? And in marketing, we call this business to business or business to consumer. And in this case, we'll say that we're going to target the average consumer, the folks in our neighborhood, While a yoga studio that focuses on corporate retreats might be a good idea, let's say in this instance, that's not where we're going. So what do similar businesses do? What do other social or what do other yoga studios do to market their business? Well, if you look, you'll see a lot of folks do social media. They might print out flyers in their local neighborhood or other things that are kind of localized. So for this instance, we'll say that a lot of businesses do social media for their yoga studio. And what do I know that makes an ideal or who do I know that makes an ideal customer for my yoga studio? And we'll say that our friend Abby is the perfect person who practices yoga regularly, and she could really get a lot of use out of something like a yoga studio. So the next step is we would go and ask Abby some questions. And what are the kinds of questions that we're really looking at? We kind of want to know things on two different spectrums. We want to know the demographics of our ideal client, which is going to be things like age, gender, location, education level, occupation, kind of like those. People kind of refer to them sometimes as like hard information rather than soft information. So these are immutable characteristics. Someone might be able to move, but once they move, they're in a new location. It's not really a personality trait. Versus psychographics, where they're more in line with someone's personality, that might be related to goals or motivations that they have. In our yoga studio example, a goal or motivation would be healthy living. Or it might relate to their frustrations or hobbies. And those are kind of more of those like soft characteristics of about a person. And something to keep in mind is your industry might have restrictions on being able to advertise to demographics, and psychographics are a really great way to key in on your ideal target audience without having to deal with those restrictions. And an example of a kind of business that has those sort of restrictions is like a realtor or a financial advisor, for example. So we'll go to talk to our friend Abby, and we do a little interview, and we get some of that basic demographic and psychographic information from Abby. So we get it all put down on paper so that we can really get a look at it and see what we're going for here. You want to try to find answers related to your business when you're asking questions of the person who you think is a good ideal customer. And I do strongly recommend doing this. We'll send out a template of your ideal customer profile in the follow-up to this workshop with the slide deck and recording that's blank, so you can fill out your own. But if you haven't done an ideal customer profile or a business persona canvas or something to that effect, that's a very, very useful tool for making sure that you're really getting the most out of your marketing. You'll want to understand why customers are making buying decisions. Why do people in your demographic or your target audience really making the decisions about buying that they're going for? And it can be as complex or as simple as you need. And as I mentioned, this template is available. And this is another version of that template that we made that I put together for our yoga studio example that just has a little bit more interest. It's a little more broad. And really, it should change depending on what you find to be the most valuable for your business and the amount of information that you think you need. So you can see in this example, for our yoga studio, we're really kind of focusing in on younger women who might live in the area where we hope to put our yoga studio, which in this instance is Biddeford. They have an occupation somewhere in arts and culture, or they might be very engaged in arts and culture. In this instance, we'll say that they shop local, they like iced coffee. They don't really care for the idea of going to a commercial gym, but they really like the idea of staying healthy and fit and being health conscious. So where can you get some information on these folks? You filled out your ideal customer profile. In my opinion, a local library is actually a really great resource for this sort of thing. There are online tools such as the Gale Business Database, Data Axle, or Consumer Reports that are available through most local libraries across the state, especially the Portland Library and the Bangor Library. And if you are a Mainer, anywhere in the state of Maine, you can get a library card through the Bangor Public Library from Hannah, who I have here on the slide, or contact information. And Hannah can set you up with a library card that can get you access to any of the data that we're going to go through here today. And the next thing that we're going to dive into is actually showcasing how you can get data from a library and then use it after you've put together your ideal customer canvas. So what can this data look like? So when you're at the library and you're looking through some of this data, this is something that I feel like very closely matches what we're looking for, what we got from our friend Abby in our yoga studio example. So Abby's a younger person. This is called a psychographic profile by Gale Business Data and Demographics Now. And this gives us some insight into different kinds of people. They're called psychographic profiles. There's 72 of them in this particular reference. And it just gives us some insight beyond what we already put down on our ideal customer canvas in order to kind of like really reach and expand it and give us some better insight into how we can market to our target audience. In this example, you can see on channel preference here on the right, the higher the number is actually worse for the demographic that we're going for here. So our best bet is probably to reach out on social media, which is something that we did find when we did a little market research on other yoga studios earlier. We can also find things like Gale Business Maps data, and this will show of that influence by influencers profile that we were just looking at, which we think really closely aligns with our target audience that we're going for with Abby. How many of those folks actually live in our area? Is this actually feasible? So we have data, but we have information on who we want to reach, but do these people actually live in an area where I want to put my business? And as you can see from the red here, Biddeford and Portland are both areas where our target audience lives. So Biddeford is a good choice for putting down our yoga studio. And so we get into like really how does this geographic data help? It can help with things like picking a location. It can help with things like posting flyers, or if you decide that you want to send mailers to a neighborhood, depending on your business. It can help with things like geotagging where you want to advertise on social media, or which radio stations might be a good pick for you, depending on the reach that a radio station might have. And something that we'll cover a little bit later is maybe it's really good for helping finding co-marketing partners or other businesses that have a similar demographic to you or a similar target audience who wants to reach out to the same audience that you're reaching out to. So how can this data really help pick a platform? Well, your ideal customer profile will inform you on your ideal platforms. As we just saw from Gale Business Data, radio is not a really good choice for our yoga studio, but social media is. And maybe something like print or flyers might be a good choice for our yoga studio, but I'm not really sure if something like direct mail might be, just based on the demographics that we have available and the density. And that's something really important to keep in mind, is not all platforms are good for all businesses. And I feel like this is a really great example of that, because a lot of times people always say, oh, well, you have a business, you should be on social media. For some companies, social media just doesn't work. And that's something that they really should identify and make sure that they understand. But which platform, right? So what platform is the best? That's always going to depend upon your business, who you're trying to target, and how much that target audience utilizes that platform. Or another way of thinking about it is, how do they engage with that platform? Do they do it at work, at home, in the car? Can you envision your brand being on this platform? For example, let's say your target audience, let's say we'll go back to our iced coffee example. Do we really want to advertise our iced coffee on a podcast that someone might listen to in the car? Maybe not, depending on the reach of the podcast. If it's a national podcast and you have one location for your coffee chain, that might not really be a good choice. If you're looking at something like with iced coffee and you're looking at a podcast and you're someone like Duncan and you have a bunch of locations, or maybe it's a podcast centered around the state of Maine and you have a bunch of locations in Maine, maybe that does make a lot of sense. So it really depends on your business, the scale of your business, and where you're at. And a lot of that really takes understanding where your ideal customers are and how they're going to interact with that information. A different way of thinking about this is maybe you sell something like, we'll say bolts, and you're really looking to sell to someone who handles purchase orders at a large manufacturing warehouse or large factory. that person probably isn't going to want to talk to you about that at 7 o'clock on a phone call when they're at home. They're probably going to want to talk to you about 3 o'clock on a phone call at work. So it's just really understanding when is the right time, where is the right time, and how do you reach them at that point in time that is the right time. And don't be afraid to ask someone who's close to you some questions about building out your ideal customer profile. I don't think it's a weird thing to ask someone, hey, do you still watch TV, or do you use Facebook, or when was the last time that you bought something from something you saw on Instagram? It might be not the most fluid conversation, but it's a very important one that's going to give you a lot of very important information on how to move forward. So let's use our example and really get into like, what does this look like on a practical setting? Which one do you think will get our ideal customers' attention? A direct mailer where the mail comes at home, it's individualized exposure, it might have their name on it, depending on whether or not you have a good database. And it's a very expensive way to advertise because you're sending a piece to every single person. So you're looking at least delivery fee alone is anywhere from 30 to 50 cents on a piece, plus the print cost for the piece. And you have to do an entire neighborhood or sometimes even an entire zip code, depending on who you're working with for your printer. And it's mixed in with bills and other ads. Whereas a flyer, someone could see it out and about at any point in time in the community, give us general exposure, and it's very inexpensive, and it's wherever it is that you decide to put a flyer. So it's located in the area where you know your ideal clients are. Is it a lot less likely that they're going to see that flyer? Yeah, but you're not wasting as much on your ad dollars as you would with something like direct mailer, where it could be that every 1 in 10 homes is a good fit for your product. And that means the other 9 are a loss. So in our instance of a yoga studio, I really think that putting up flyers is going to be a much more cost-effective way to bring folks in, even if it might not get quite as many folks as a direct mailer might. So which social media platform is good for a yoga studio? Is it something like Instagram, where it's a slightly younger audience, it's more image focused and visually oriented, and it's much more of like a personal relationship with the platform or with the people on the platform? Or do you think it would be something like LinkedIn, where it's typically a slightly older audience, it's much more story focused, posts stay on LinkedIn for weeks at a time, they'll come up in your feed, and it's very business oriented and it's career oriented? I think in our example, the majority of the people we're trying to reach are probably going to be on Instagram. They might be on certain hashtags on Instagram, like healthy living, and reaching them on those hashtags, they'll be in a much better mindset to want to engage with the yoga studio than if they see a similar post on LinkedIn when they're in a work setting. So this also brings us to ad dollars. So there are organic platforms versus paid platforms. And really the huge difference between the two is whether or not you need to spend ad dollars to engage on that platform. So organic platforms are usually low cost or free. It looks like things like posting on social media. It looks like putting up a flyer in your neighborhood. It might look like just doing general word of mouth and referral through other customer or through your existing customers. It's something that usually requires a lot more time. You need a deep understanding of how to connect with your ideal customer profile to do it effectively. And it's usually best for a long-term strategy. So organic platforms are really great for building up your business over time and kind of creating that momentum and keeping it going. And on the other hand of that, we have instant paid reach platforms where you can instantly get in touch with folks who are outside of your normal orbit. It's usually very fast, so you can run a 2-week ad campaign. You can see exactly how well it did, and usually getting in front of a much larger audience than you would normally with something like an organic platform. It's usually a stronger customer profile, or a strong customer profile directly helps with your ad targeting. So if you really understand, for example, that in your particular business, your clients really like country music, then you have a much better understanding of which radio station you should play a radio ad on, for example. And paid platforms, I think, are best for short-term results. They shouldn't be what I would consider a long-term expected part of your marketing. Your marketing long-term strategy should be facing around organic platforms and how to make that organic growth happen, with paid platforms and paid advertising dollars being a way to kind of kick up a notch what you're already doing. And a good marketing strategy will use both. So here are some tips and tricks on how to use organic social media to really reach out to your target audience in a way that's going to be best for your business. And this is some really general advice. Respond to comments like everyone is watching. This really kind of relates to negative comments or negative reviews, maybe. You want to make sure that you're not talking to the person who made that review or that comment, especially a negative one. You want to talk to the person who's going to read that comment in 6 months and make a decision on whether or not they want to go into your store based on your response. I think everyone's had the experience where they've gone on Amazon or Google and they've read through the reviews and they've read through some of the responses from the seller. And some of the seller's responses can really turn you off from going to a restaurant or trying a product or a service. And really, you want to try to avoid that by really talking to everyone rather than just addressing that individual person when you make responses to comments. And on top of that, we say this a lot in marketing, especially around social media, but be authentic. And what I like to say instead of authentic is talk like you're talking to someone in person. So would this be the conversation you actually have with someone if they're like standing in front of you versus what you think someone might want to hear in order to like make the right series of words for them to click on something and make a buying decision? It's really easy for people to tell intuitively whether or not this is something is authentic, whether you're nervous, whether or not something like really makes sense to them. So just trying to be yourself and trying to act like you're just having a conversation about something that you're passionate about in your business will help a lot when it comes to writing something for social media or just engaging on social in general. And another quick tip is always use photos or videos. If you feel like you don't have a photo or something to take a picture of, take a video. Things like TikTok have really drastically reduced the quality threshold for a business to do video. So it doesn't have to be a professional looking commercial for even a top brand to make a video nowadays, especially with the rise of influencers. So while it might feel a little awkward, just it's much easier and the platform will boost it much more if you use a photo or a video. And organic social media is also great for co-marketing. That's something that we touched on earlier that we're going to have a slide on here in a little bit. So I'll cover it then, but social is really where co-marketing can shine. On the other hand, we have organic websites. These are much more longer term. A one-page website is usually enough and good for most businesses. There are some businesses that might require more than that, or that might require specific web design for their business to be more effective in their online marketing. But the majority of businesses, restaurants, Main Street businesses, or solopreneur businesses will work totally fine with a one-page website. And especially for the first 6 months to a year of business, it really doesn't have to be much more than essentially being like a business card that's online. Point of sale systems in email marketing software usually have landing page options that work totally fine for organic websites. And if you feel like you need more information out there than just like a single page with the most critical stuff, then just write a blog. Blogs are free or incredibly cheap, and you can write it in your voice and put the information out there that you feel you need to communicate to your clients and kind of build out that SEO over time. But I personally don't think that it makes a lot of sense for the majority of startups to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a new website. So we get to that co-marketing that we talked about a few times already. And so co-marketing is really just when two businesses collaborate on a goal. It's when they're marketing to another curated audience, typically a very similar audience to the one that they have, and they're trying to convey trust with this other brand and build that credibility with this other brand through collaboration. Co-marketing is usually low cost or free. It's usually can be thought of in terms of investing time, meeting with this other business and talking about what you want to do that you think will really work best for both of you. And you want to make sure that you're doing your co-marketing and co-marketing relationship building with your ideal customer in mind. You want to make sure that you're really building on your orbit. When you co-market with another business, effectively what you're doing is you're telling your evangelists, hey, this is a trusted business that I think aligns with my values and brand as a brand, and they're doing the same for you. So it's a really great way to get in front of their orbit and their evangelists and get them in front of your orbit and your evangelists. So just some examples of some co-marketing that happened in Biddeford over the last few years. We had Yego Coffee of Boston and Time and Tide did a collaboration where they hosted a discussion on ethical sourcing for coffee in the industry and the supply chain. And they did this with Yego Coffee out of Boston. And a reason why this was a really great way to co-market is you're getting in front of the audience of another local roaster who really kind of focuses on the folks who really have like a high-end taste in coffee, and they have the same ideal clients, but they're in different physical locations. So people in Boston might order some Time and Tide coffee, or maybe they'll stop in Biddeford on their way up for vacation during the summer. And people who are in the Biddeford area can hear about Yego Coffee. Maybe they'll order some and they'll be able to try it next time they go down to Boston. But it creates this way for both of these companies to reach out to people who are passionate about the kinds of product that they sell in different markets, while still being in the same industry. And on the other hand, we have doing the same market but different industries. So Lucky Pigeon Brewing is a gluten-free brewery. The gluten-free space is very popular in health and wellness at the moment. So they decided to partner with yoga instructor Emily Lane, who would do yoga on Sunday mornings in the Lucky Pigeon space, which was a great way to cross-promote audiences who are really in that health-conscious space or who might be celiac. And it's a really great way to bring new people into the Lucky Pigeon space. And it was a good way for Emily to have a space in which to do this yoga class. So that crossover was really good for both audiences. And this gets us, so beyond organic, we are getting into paid ads and what do paid ads look like. I do see the question that I have in the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I will get to questions here in a few minutes. Paid ads have a variety of different reasons why you might engage with them. A lot of times it's because there's already an audience that you're looking to tap into rather than building your own audience. So TV, and they might provide different levels of value as well. So TV commercials, if you see a brand on TV, it's almost always seen as very credible. So TV lends credibility to brands. Newspapers lend a level of locality to brands. Newspapers only service specific areas. So if you see an ad in a newspaper for a business, you know they're in your local area, which isn't necessarily the case with something like TV or social. Social media ads can be as targeted as you want them to be, and they're typically very affordable, which is great, especially if you're starting up. Radio is also one of those things where they're very targeted. A lot of radio stations have their own listener profiles, which you can compare to your ideal customer profile to see whether or not you think that is a good fit for you. And radio stations also tend to be very local in their broadcast area. Google ads are really great for targeting very specific people who are at the buying decision, depending on what you're looking to target in Google ads. For example, food near me is someone who's obviously hungry and they're looking to get some food right now. And that is a great Google targeted ad if you want to be competing in that space. And influencers are another way. If you have a very niche service or product, you can get in contact with an influencer who's already curated an audience around that. And you're effectively, it's like a paid co-marketing where you're asking them to feature your product or service to their evangelist in their orbit. So we've talked a lot about ideal customer profiles. We've talked a lot about kind of like what they mean and how to use them, but what does it actually look like when you're trying to use an ideal customer profile? So let's do an example of how I would market for our example yoga studio in Biddeford. And as you can see here, I have some different audience details plugged in. This is a screen grab directly from uh, Meta Business Suite, which is the Facebook and Instagram ad software. And I have highlighted or underlined in blue different demographic pieces that we pulled off of our ideal customer profile, and highlighted in red different psychographic details. And this is like really where we get into those practical steps of like why you might want to do this thing or how it works and why it matters. Is you can take that information that you've gathered and plug it directly into Facebook or Instagram or another social media platform and target exactly who you're looking to target with as narrow of an audience that you want. And that is exactly how you really want to utilize this kind of template. And so how can you utilize this outside of something like social media where you can just pick and choose and plug in exactly what you want? As I mentioned earlier, and this is true as well with TV and newspaper, they tend to have viewer profiles who are going to be essentially like an ideal customer profile in reverse. These are the people who tend to use our product, or this is what our audience looks like. If you're trying to connect with our audience, and this is the overlap that you're going to want to have to make sure that it's going to be a fruitful connection for you. And a great way is you can also talk to your agent or underwriter and just provide them with your ideal customer profile and ask their recommendation. They're really trying to make sure that you come back and continue to advertise with them, so they are going to do the best that they can to make sure that it is a good ad for you and it does perform. And you'll have to decide with traditional media, you'll have to decide whether or not you have your own media or if you want them to create it for you. A lot of times they have in-house media production, or they have like a video crew or a graphic designer who will make your ad for you. And that can be a part of an included cost, or you can do that on the side if you want a little more creative control and hire someone directly yourself. Or if you feel confident in your skills, you can create your own ad as well. And that really kind of wraps up the topic that we have here today, is startup marketing on a budget and how to use an ideal customer profile. Please feel free to use the Q&A window. We have a few questions that I'll go ahead and get started with here shortly. So the first question that we have here is from Valerie, and it was, could you describe some of the restrictions I was talking about earlier? I would need to know a little bit more, Valerie, about the kind of business that you have and the work that you do to give like some specific advice. But just as like an example of what I was talking about, realtors can't really use demographic data because it would be against the licensing that they do to advertise to specific demographics. It can be construed as potentially trying to discriminate against a protected class. So a way to make sure that you can still try to advertise and get the best out of your advertising dollars while not discriminating against a protected class is to focus on those psychographic details, or those things that are not like, or more like personality traits and less like demographic hard details. So instead of focusing on someone's age or gender, you can focus on whether or not they like vinyl music, or whether or not they are engaged in their community efforts. They do a lot of volunteer work, things like that. And we had a question here from Chauncey. When building the personas for an ideal customer profile, uh, is it built from researching current customers, or is it built based on a desired target customer, or maybe a mixture of both? This is a great question. I think you should you should get your initial feedback from existing customers, or people who you think would be good existing or good customers. And then once you have that initial feedback and that initial understanding, you can branch out into whether or not, hey, I'm really trying to target people like this, or like I want to take my brand in this direction eventually. So I want to try to pull in more people with this kind of trait or that kind of trait or that demographic or this psychographic. And you want to add that on top and try to keep an eye on your marketing to make sure that you're moving in that direction. But I would try to start with the folks who are already what you would consider to be good customers. Yeah, so we had some input here from Eric. Speaking of social ads, we use a program called Adobe Express. I assume it's very similar to Canva. Adobe Express, Canva, and there are a lot of different, I would say, graphic editing softwares or different kinds of media editing softwares out there that are very, very useful for small business owners. Completely agree with that. And it's a great way to get things started and make it look a little professional without having to hire someone right off the bat. And as I mentioned earlier, feel free to drop any questions that you have in the Q&A panel or just right into the chat. I'm happy to talk about specific industries or strategies that you might want to implement depending on what you're thinking. And we can get some feedback going from there. One of the things that I would definitely try to look into is when I send out the follow, or when Michael sends out the follow-up email, you will see the template in there. Go ahead, Jamison, and put your answer or put your question in the webinar chat or the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and get to it. I would definitely take a look at what social media platforms you're using and how you can choose your advertising options, because that could really inform how you decide you want to write up your ideal customer profile, and keeping in mind the mixing of both demographics and psychographics when you're kind of putting those things in there to really make sure that you're getting down to your ideal customer profile. And I don't have any more questions at the moment. I'll wait just a minute or two here and see if we get any more questions coming in. And if we don't, we will go ahead and hop off. We had another question here from Valerie. I've played with designing a website on Wix and it seems affordable. Am I missing something? How do I know if I should go to a blog? Wix is just a website hosting software. You can do a blog on Wix, and Wix, I think, is a totally valid platform as long as you think that it works for you and it looks good for you. If you want to expand a little bit more on your question, Valerie, I might be able to get a little bit deeper information, but I think for a lot of businesses, Wix is a good start. We have a question from Francis. I'm looking to market my bookkeeping services, but I'm not interested in using social media. What methods would you recommend? Bookkeeping is one of those areas where it's very difficult for a lot of businesses to hire a bookkeeper in Maine right now. There's a lot of demand for the services. And if you're not looking to engage on social media, I think a great way to market your services would be doing networking groups or going to networking events where you can just kind of talk to folks and tell them what you do. And as a bookkeeper and with the demand on bookkeepers right now, I'm sure it will be a very easy way to market your services, especially to folks in the industry. If you're going to networking events as a bookkeeper, I would look to market with, or I would look to meet with like CPAs, accountants, lawyers, those other folks who work with businesses, because you could be a referral for them, and their clients will be very happy to be able to refer a bookkeeper. We have a question here from Madhu. For a high-tech consulting business, what is your recommendations for marketing? If you want to put a little bit more information in there on what kind of high-tech consulting business you're doing, that's a very, very broad group. And depending on what you're doing, it would really change up the kind of marketing that you're going to want to do there. This is a great question from Chauncey. What is a good target for how much I should budget for marketing? 5% of revenue, 10%. The average business goes somewhere between 3 to 5%. I think that's a very healthy marketing budget. And I think that's very doable for most small businesses, especially if you already have a kind of core group of customers that can keep you going and you're looking to kind of expand on top of that. And I think in a lot of instances, if you're doing the marketing yourself, 3% can be plenty, and maybe even more than you need, depending on how well you've kind of tuned in your marketing strategies. We had the question in Jameson from the chat. Uh, he's initiating a general labor company and trying to recruit a network of companies outside of my employees, correlative to all types of labor, almost a referral hotline for all aspects of labor. How would I market recruitment without being too public? I think one of the best ways to do that would be maybe joining something like the General Contractors of Maine or the AGC, and just networking with those other small business owners, and probably trying to feel out whether or not you feel like they'd be interested in something like that, and then building that network from there. It's kind of hard to give advice on how to market recruiting something while also having it be private, just with the things that we've covered in today's workshop. You can still put together an ideal customer profile for who you're trying to reach out to, and think of it more from that aspect. But a lot of what we talked about today was more that broad public marketing stuff. So I'm not really sure if I have a lot of great advice for that off the top of my head. And we had an anonymous attendee here. Uh, if I'm thinking of creating or offering a digital course, so not strictly something to a local audience, would you have a different suggestions of anything related to ICP? No. Whether or not you're going for a strictly local audience or whether or not you're going for a broader audience, it's the same. It's the same template. It's the same tools. You're just taking that localized component out of it. So instead of using demographics map data, you would just use the demographics psychographic data, build your ideal customer profile. It might be a good thing to use the map data to see if there are pockets of your ideal customer in specific areas. Just as an example, let's say that Columbus, Ohio happens to have a much higher population of your audience in that location as compared to San Francisco, then you'll probably want to put more digital ad dollars on Facebook and Instagram to advertise to Columbus. But otherwise, your ICP and your details just need to be focused around similar concepts rather than hard facts. So instead of lives in Biddeford, maybe lives coastally. So Madhu weighed back in and say 5G mobile network and architecture and design. That is a very specific business. I think you might be very well off by really keying in on your ideal customer profile and then figuring out from there. That sounds like something where networking is probably going to be more helpful than something like social media. It depends on what you're hoping to do with that business. I really just kind of guessing based off of like a vague description. I would put together a really detailed ideal customer profile and then just try to network with folks and ask them if they know someone similar to your ideal customer profile. You can just drop hints in the same way that you put things in into Facebook, like, oh, for our yoga studio example, we put into Facebook, oh, I want to talk to someone who likes iced coffee. In your instance of 5G mobile network architecture and design, maybe you want to talk to someone in telecommunications. So it's just kind of like taking the same concepts and twisting them a little bit to kind of fit the market that you're in. And we have a question here from Catherine. Where would you recommend a small home-based canning business to start in marketing? My business is based around unique canned products in a small town setting. I personally absolutely love this question. I probably canned 50 cans of jam this year, so I'm right there with you, Catherine. I think it's a great business idea. One thing I would look into is there's kind of a bit of a revolution happening in Maine, especially, but across the country in kind of food sourcing and ethical food sourcing. It's happening a lot in the healthy living communities, the vegan communities, and other food conscious communities where they're trying to eat more locally. They're trying to eat healthier. And those things both tend to align with things like a local canning business. Just by the design of the business, it's likely to be healthier than the mass produced stuff. It's likely to be a lot better for the environment just because it's produced locally. So I would really kind of look into how do you advertise to those growing audiences who are food conscious and who might be locally conscious of shopping at local businesses. And another thing is, I didn't really cover it too much in this workshop, but your ideal customer profile doesn't have to be a person. For Catherine, a really good example of an ideal customer profile might be a local health food store. So what are some of the qualities of the local health food store and how does your product fit in there? And with the existing, maybe you might already be in a health food store. How did that go? What was that relationship like? And what kind of things really mattered to them? And how can you pitch that to others and creating an ideal customer profile around that? All right. It looks like that was our last question. So I'll wait just another little bit just in case anyone puts another one in there. But I want to say thank you to everyone for joining me today as we are getting closer to the end of our time. I also want to say thank you to Machias Savings for being a generous sponsor of our SCORE workshops. If you found this workshop helpful today, please keep an eye out for a follow-up survey that will go out. Just lets us know how we're doing and it gives us a better idea of how to do our workshops in the future. And if you don't have a SCORE mentor and you're unfamiliar with a SCORE mentor, it's very similar to this where someone can sit down and help you with business skills. And feel free to sign up. We'll also have a link for that in the follow-up email, so you can just click on it. It'll ask you for your zip code, and then you put in your zip code, talk a little bit about your business, and we can get you partnered with someone who can help in areas like marketing or maybe business plans, cash flow, really anything that comes to running your business that you might need help with. A SCORE mentor can help you. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great week. Bye, everyone.